Welcome back to the Sense of Life podcast. I'm Joe,
And I'm Cody.
and today we got a Jimmy Stewart twofer for you. We watched It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, and The Shop Around the Corner, 1940.
This is a Christmas special, so
That's
Merry
right.
Christmas, everyone. And this will be the last episode of this year. So
And the
Happy
last
New
episode
Year as
of this
well.
season.
Of this season as well.
Yeah.
Our first season was, I think, about the first 16 or so episodes. That was our kind of trial run to see if we liked it. And then this was kind of the continuation of that. And season 3 will be next year. And I think I will just have that season be that year.
All
Just
right.
for easier housekeeping on my end.
Fair enough.
And okay. This was an interesting one.
Yeah.
Before we get to the movies, I kind of wanted to address the Ayn Rand shaped elephant in the room.
It's a weird shaped elephant.
Yeah.
Weird shape for an elephant, I should say.
It has a dollar sign as a trunk, you know. And
is it like the elephant equivalent of like a gang sign with your hands, is to like make a dollar sign with your trunk?
Yeah. It's like that Ayn Rand meme that Kirk Wilcox always has of like the deal with it glasses going down on Rand's face.
Oh yeah, I know the one.
Whatever,
friend of the
whatever.
podcast, Kirk Wilcox.
Friend of the pod, Kirk Wilcox.
Yeah.
And the elephant in the room, I think, it's partially It's a Wonderful Life, but I think it's also the tendency of objectivists to, in their analysis of art, particularly film,
Yeah.
and really literature as well. But I think I'm a little bit more forgiving on Rand's analysis of literature because she was a novelist and she was really thinking this stuff through and had reasons for what she was saying. And then the problem is trying to apply that to different mediums.
Right.
So, like, Rand's discussion of plot as this key concept, and the way Rand defines plot is pretty significant, and I like the way she does it. But I might be kind of jumping all over the place here, so bear with me. We don't take notes for this podcast.
I took a single note for this podcast, and we'll get to that.
We'll get there. So trying to apply Rand's discussion of plot as this key element of literary art, I think you run into some problems when you try to discuss film being primarily a visual medium. I think there's a narrative element to it, but I think you miss the forest for the trees a lot, and I think a lot of objectivists tend to do that, especially analyzing movies. And okay, so I've been re-listening to this podcast that I used to listen to more often, and then I had a bit of a, well, I'll keep it civil and call it a beef with the host. It's called Welcome to the Midside. It's a decent podcast if you want something to put on. I don't really talk to Justin, who hosts that show, very much anymore, but William, who is the co-host, I think follows both of us on Twitter.
He's liked a couple of my tweets.
Yeah, and he retweeted my tweet about the new Alex Garland movie. But anyway, and host of that show was discussing this movie Priscilla that came out this year, which was probably there's a few more movies I want to see this year before I make that decision. But it's probably my favorite movie this year.
That's the Sofia Coppola movie about
Priscilla Presley.
Yeah.
And he compares it to Elvis Presley. I mean, not Elvis Presley, Elvis, the Baz Luhrmann movie from last year,
Right.
which I have not seen, so I'm not going to comment on the movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
But he does the kind of classic objectivist tactic of reviewing art of romantic and naturalist,
Right.
uh,
Always a
calling
classic.
Priscilla many such cases. Uh, Priscilla being the naturalist and Elvis being the romantic, and
Yeah.
it's this dichotomy that kind of develops in like I think the motive is uh, I think the motive is generally good behind what they're trying to do here, and I promise I'll loop this back around to the topic at hand. Just
Sure.
bear with me.
Sure.
Uh, I think the idea here is to not want people to waste their time on stuff that may not be valuable to their lives. I, however, would argue that even if maybe the explicit aims of any specific director or whatever don't necessarily align with your own, it's still worthwhile to engage with something. Um,
Yeah.
Rand talks about naturalist artists, writers really that she respects and admires. Sinclair Lewis is the main one.
Right. It would be
Uh,
impossible to like and respect naturalist artists if Rand were to just dismiss it outright, because then she wouldn't have been reading their work.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of we like to jokingly call it a case of week one objectivism,
Yeah.
where you
A fire in your belly.
yeah, where you just take Rand's perspective on, say, Victor Hugo or um, the opposite in like Rudyard Kipling, and um, just kind of take that as gospel, basically take it on faith, um, without engaging with Rudyard Kipling or even Victor Hugo. And I would just argue that it would be valuable to consider otherwise. And that kind of brings us to today's topic, which is in objectivist sphere, the kind of um, what's the word here? The bane of many objectivist existence, which is Frank Capra's 1946 Christmas film, "It's a Wonderful Life."
Such a dramatic, like, several minute explanation to
Yes.
to preemptively say before we go, yeah, that was a pretty good movie.
Yeah. Um,
Before we earn the ire of the all three of our objectivist listeners.
yeah. All three of them in like Estonia or whatever. And
Famous objectivist hub Estonia. That one.
Ayn Rand Center Estonia.
Estonia.
Estonia. Arcus.
Yeah.
Do we want to start with It's a Wonderful Life, or do we want to start with The Shop Around the Corner?
I think we'll start with The Shop Around the Corner, not only because it's the older of the two movies, but because I don't think I have nearly as much to say about it, so kind of sweeping it under the rug, getting it out of the way. I liked it. It was a fun little movie. Very romantic, you might say.
Sure.
And it had a happy ending. And
Yeah.
I guess I think you described it when we watched it as being like the kind of movie where you watch it and you're like, oh, that's cute. That's a nice ending.
Yeah.
That's kind of it's kind of it.
Yeah, I put in my Letterboxd review of this. This is my second time watching this movie, and my first time I liked it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I think Euron Brook had recommended The Shop Around the Corner as a say antidote to It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Oh, the irony of what we thought of both of these movies.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just goes to show that like filmmaking is more than just the theme, guys. Like,
Yeah.
It's a Wonderful Life is a beautifully shot movie. Like,
Yeah.
visually speaking, it jumps out at you way more than The Shop Around the Corner does. And it's only 6 years apart between these two movies, and they're both like Jimmy Stewart lead, like, romantic Christmas films. Romantic in the literal, like, there's a love story in it sense.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I would also argue that It's a Wonderful Life is a romantic story in the literary sense as well, but whatever. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Ernst Lubitsch directed The Shop Around the Corner. Lubitsch is
German.
They're German. He's known for what is kind of referred to as the quote Lubitsch touch unquote.
But he touched it too much.
And it has to do with how he sets up tension, either comedic or otherwise, through subtlety and really through a lot of empty space. The main thing that happens in The Shop Around the Corner in this case is the shot of, we're kind of jumping to like the latter half of the movie, but it's a shot of the main door in the shop, and the owner of the shop has just attempted suicide, and we just see the doorway. We don't see anyone on either side of the doorway, and the young employee guy comes in and comes out. Yeah, yes. The 1940 twink.
Yeah, yeah. His name was Peppy in the movie.
Peppy, Peppy the Frog.
I was thinking Le Pew.
that too. Pepe Le Pew goes in and stops the suicide attempt, and then brings the gun outside. And that whole, at least as I understand it, that whole setup and resolution of that action is the kind of Lubitsch touch, which is that empty space or if not empty space, then action happening off screen that is more dramatic than action happening on screen,
right,
or something like that. I'm not exactly film theorist, and I really don't feel like googling what the Lubitsch touch is, but I believe that's what people were referring to when they described that.
Yeah,
and Lubitsch was really prolific at the time. I believe he started in the silent era.
Yeah, so it's a very economical way of presenting a very serious thing, is essentially what it is.
It's visual storytelling by omission.
That's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a way to, and his movies were very economical. Like you said, this movie cost $500,000, I believe, to shoot, which in 1940 money is probably like $2 million or something.
Right.
But if you consider the just building like a set there for 500,000, I don't know. It's a cool concept here. So what happens in this movie is it focuses around Alfred Kralik. This all takes place in Budapest, which is quite funny because all of the actors are American, which is just this like classic Hollywoodism.
Right.
And they're all playing. What is the nationality of these people? Are they Polish? Because they're in Budapest.
That's Hungary.
Okay.
They're all Hungarian.
And
Jimmy Stewart definitely gives off Hungarian vibes to me.
Yeah. The Jimmy Stewart Hungarian physiognomy.
Yeah. Bringing that one back.
Alfred Kralik, who is a salesman at this Matischek and Company, I believe is the name of the firm. And Matischek is kind of a tired, grumpy old shop owner, and
And he's played
Mark.
by Frank Morgan, who played the Wizard of Oz in The Wizard of Oz. So
Only 1 year prior to this movie.
yeah, yeah. It was
So,
funny when we were watching it. I was like, he looks familiar. I think he was in The Wizard of Oz. Sure enough, he
and
was.
he was in fact the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I mainly remembered him as the like guy that is like the traveling salesman guy, and then I was like, oh
Yeah.
right, the traveling salesman guy is also the Wizard of Oz.
Plot twist.
Yeah,
Spoilers.
yeah, yeah.
And a wannabe clerk comes in, played by Margaret Sullivan, and kind of sets off the catalyst of the love story between James Stewart and Margaret Sullivan's character, which is uh, a situation where they're both sending letters to a pen pal who they believe is far away, but it turns out he's right there with her the whole time or something.
Yeah.
This movie, I think this movie was remade quite a bit. I think the more famous remake is it's called You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, which I have not seen.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Are they exchanging emails in that one?
No, I think it's like a period piece or something. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't seen it.
Okay. It's
Yeah,
it came out in 1998, so I thought it might have been like, you know, they got their old beige PCs.
yeah, exactly. And it just kind of
Dude,
follows.
they totally are. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the fucking Wikipedia for You've Got Mail. Yeah, they totally are using AOL email her AOL email account. Holy shit.
And today it would be like You've Got a Simp, and then just,
he's been paying for her OnlyFans. he was her number one fucking subscriber or whatever, and she didn't even know.
And she was
well, he would definitely know. He couldn't unwittingly be fucking her number one simp.
Yeah, we'd have to workshop the kind of essentials of the plot there to make it work.
Yeah, we would write that remake and then burn the script and kill ourselves because that is fucking evil.
The shop around the corner is suicide pact. Yeah.
Anyway,
so it's a classic romantic comedy, and it's quite good. I believe my first watch on it, I feel like I overrated it quite a bit.
Right.
But overall, I found it a bit sluggish. It's shorter than It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, it's a cute little movie, and that's what I'll say about it. I didn't hate it. It wasn't amazing.
Yeah. My understanding is Lubitsch has better movies.
Right.
So I want to kind of get into his filmography. I know I mentioned him before, but Eugene Kotlyarenko talks a lot about Lubitsch.
Mm-hmm.
Lubitsch is kind of like a key figure in the kind of creation of sound cinema and also the language of talkies, motion pictures today. And he Billy Wilder wrote a couple scripts for Ernst Lubitsch. I think Alfred Hitchcock owes a lot to Ernst Lubitsch in a way. Yeah, so I think he's a pretty important figure, and this is just one of his maybe lesser movies, but not bad by any way. It's pretty simple construction here. The unlikely, because the two characters, they're kind of antagonistic towards each other, and by the end they fall in love. It's more interesting in the movie than I'm making it sound here.
Yeah. Both but this and It's a Wonderful Life were preserved in the National Film Registry. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's not really a. I was gonna say that's not really a huge achievement because there are like a quadrillion movies that are preserved in there, but there's also like 90 quadrillion movies that have been made. So
Yeah,
it's
it's definitely
it's
not
important.
a bad thing.
Yeah.
Um, Looks
I
like on the Wikipedia here it cites David Thompson talking about it as among the greatest of all films.
mm,
A love story about a couple too much in love with love to fall tidily into one another's arms. It's a good way to put it.
I see. Yeah.
It's they're in love with the concept of being in love with someone, but when they actually have to interact with a human, it's actually quite modern in that way. When the incel actually has to interact with a human woman.
We're not
Uh,
calling Jimmy Stewart an incel in this film.
well, no, but
Had to think about that for a second there. Uh,
just just putting that idea in the mind.
yeah. Um, not gonna
But as far
lie.
as
Oh.
oh yeah, you
Uh,
can.
yeah. Not gonna lie. I didn't know that this entire movie was in Budapest. By the way.
Yeah, I think it says there's a title card that says this is a story based in Budapest or something. There's this whole
Okay,
like
yeah. I guess that I
like
tuned that out of my fucking head. I was just like,
yeah.
I guess in my mind, people back like a fucking almost 100 years ago just had, um, there was a lot of fucking I don't know immigrants that had really fucking weird names. So
Yeah.
in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, yeah, Alfred Kraulik, yeah, yeah, okay. Oh Hugo
Yeah, and
Matichek, yeah, he must be like an immigrant or something.
yeah, I was looking at it like, what are these like Polacks over here? You know, and they're
It's like they're
Hungarian.
Hungarian in Budapest the whole time, and I'm just like, oh, okay,
Oops.
shit, my dumbass not paying attention.
Well, fucking rip.
Yeah,
Um,
I would also
it's
classify both this and It's a Wonderful Life as incidental Christmas movies.
I
In
agree.
in the sense that most of the plot has nothing to do with Christmas, but they both end on like a big sort of happy event that happens to be on Christmas.
Yes,
Um,
and in a way, aren't kind of all Christmas movies like that, except the ones that are like a Christmas story or whatever.
Christmas with the Cranks.
Yeah, Black Christmas.
Classic Christmas movie, Christmas with the Cranks with Tim Allen.
Yeah, haven't seen it.
I said that a bit ironically, I guess. uh, all I remember is that Jamie Lee Curtis is in that movie, and that's it.
Okay,
That's all I remember.
good to know. Yeah, Shop Around the Corner. It's definitely a movie that was made uh, and is quite good. I think we watched it on Max. Anything else we want to say about Shop Around the Corner?
I don't think so. I would say, despite not enjoying it as much as It's a Wonderful Life, I would still say it's worth watching, though.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely worth watching. I don't know that I buy what I think is kind of Euron's larger point of this is like the romantic realist version of It's a Wonderful Life.
mm.
It's like a cute rom com that is watchable.
Yeah. We're declaring war today. Very
Not
polite war.
war, just polite disagreement.
Fair enough.
And it's what was that? This might like be declaring war, but what was that one review of the fucking Miyazaki movie that you're on for that we
Oh,
clown on all the time?
when he oh fuck, what was that? He said shit. It was fuck, what's that the fucking Japanese zero, The Wind Rises, that's what it is. He was watching the Miyazaki film The Wind Rises, which is about the guy that invented the Japanese Zero fighter plane, and kind of like following his life in like kind of just I guess like a decent chunk of it is in like World War II and shit like that. But he basically tried to summarize the film. And to be fair to Yaron, he does his show every day. He dedicates a very small section of his show to movie reviews while he's talking about everything else, keeping up with the news, that sort of thing. So this isn't like just to cover all bases here. This isn't like hating on Yaron, but we do like to make fun of the fact that he summarized the movie as it's about staying alive and it's about living and staying alive and pursuing values. That's how he described the movie.
Yeah, and it's like great.
Yeah, that says a lot.
So, largely the purpose of the Sense of Life podcast was to provide a little bit more context to why movies are cool.
I guess so. So I don't know if we succeed at that all the time, but I guess we try.
I don't know if we succeeded about the shop around the corner, but
I don't think we did either. Oops.
But sometimes you just don't have a lot to say about a pretty decent movie.
Yeah.
Which is the kind of risk you take about like, hey, let's watch these two movies, and you're like, oh, okay.
Then you have significantly more to say about one.
Yeah,
I think that happened. That happened recently as well. Yeah,
I think it happens almost every week.
Yeah, I guess it does. It's a Wonderful Life. This is obviously it's a classic movie that is often ranked as like the best Christmas movie or one of the best Christmas movies. Up there is one of the best movies in general. And despite that, I had never seen It's a Wonderful Life. Now, when I was a kid, back when people actually had cable and watched movies on TV around Christmas, when that was a thing, I watched Christmas movies like a lot during December. Just as a rule, I guess. And I somehow never managed to watch It's a Wonderful Life. I think my mom didn't like the movie. And I think the reason was basically that she thought the little kid's voice at the end of the movie was annoying when when she says, every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. I've heard that said in like a mocking
just your
tone.
Mom being absolute hater.
Being a hater, yeah.
At this innocent child.
Yeah, like 4-year-olds like, fuck you, you annoying piece of shit.
Fuck them kids. It's basically a fantasy film.
Yeah, it starts off with like an image of like two galaxies talking to each other, and I guess they're supposed to be like angels in heaven or whatever. Yeah. Wild to represent angels in heaven as like a galaxy in the sky.
Yeah, it's really funny. This is going to be a galaxy brain integration here, but it kind of reminds me of how, I don't know if it was Rand or Peikoff that said that they really appreciate Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think Rucka Ali talked about this. And two, in particular, the Serenity Prayer, which they kind of take in a metaphorical context of just being aware that reality is what it is, and you can really only do what you can in your own immediate vicinity, or something along those lines.
Right.
And the idea of like God being a metaphor for like reality itself in this situation of like Alcoholics Anonymous talks about a higher power, and I think Peikoff had said that, well, the higher power can just be a metaphor for the idea of existence as separate from consciousness. And if I were to be a galaxy-brained Randroid, I could say that this these galaxies discussing is this metaphor made um,
Yeah.
actualized on film.
It's the literal benevolent universe. Holy shit, dude.
Yes. The benevolent universe is having a benevolent conversation
With itself.
about the a problem of someone having a malevolent universe moment.
That's right.
It was distributed by RKO Radio Pictures, which was I think in like classic Hollywood, I believe there was 5 major studios at the time, and RKO was like the smallest and largely considered like the quote unquote independent, which is not entirely accurate to call it independent, but it's like they, at risk of being totally fucking corny here, it's kind of like how you would think of A24 today. I hate that I'm making this comparison here. It's just go with it.
We're going
RKO.
With it. They did the original King Kong, right?
King Kong, I believe so. They did this movie called The Setup, directed by Robert Wise. And also, most famously, they distributed Citizen Kane.
Right.
And I think a couple more Orson Welles movies. So they were known for more risky, I think, largely lower budget as compared to like MGM and Paramount.
Mm-hmm.
Paramount might have come later. I'm not like a super big historian on the history of Hollywood. But it's interesting to think about a producer director like Frank Capra working in this scenario in the same kind of a similar situation to Orson Welles. I'm not exactly sure what the main point I'm trying to draw here is, but just an interesting bit of history there. I think I was just reading on here it's based on a short story called "The Greatest Gift," self-published by Philip Van Doren Stern in 1943, which is loosely based on Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, which I don't know if I knew that. I'm not surprised by it. It's a similar concept of a guardian angel coming down to teach someone a lesson about life.
Yeah.
Uh,
During Christmas.
So during Christmas, and and the kind of crux of what happens here is that, in case anyone hasn't seen It's a Wonderful Life, I know, Joe, this was your first time watching it. It had been years since I've seen it. But the main character, George Bailey, is essentially unhappy with his life. And what has happened is he has always wanted to, like, say, travel the world or make a bunch of money and whatnot. But every time something comes up in his life where he has to make a choice to commit to an action, he can't really bring himself to do it. So he just finds himself stagnating in this situation. And I think a lot of the objectivist complaints about the movie stems from, I think, a kind of fundamental misunderstanding of the thematic component here. And because the general like consensus about this movie that I have heard from a lot of objectivists, a lot of our friends, is that since he's contemplating suicide, he's clearly not pursuing his values for whatever reason, and therefore this movie is putting forth some kind of malevolent philosophy.
Right.
However,
because in the end, the lesson is that he was actually good for, or I guess that I don't even necessarily know if that's what the lesson is. I think the lesson is kind of just like perspective on how good things are as a result of him being there, and he kind of
Well,
just
yeah, I
loses sight of the point.
yeah, I think the main lesson, if we want to call it that, is that the so if you spend if you don't commit to an action and you end up stagnating and not getting to a place where you really wanted to be, but you kind of start complaining about it when it was really kind of your doing. This is like what you signed up for.
Yeah.
Um, you either gotta like um, make do with what you have, or make an adjustment. And at every conceivable point when George can make an adjustment, he doesn't, out of
Mhm.
fear or uh, some kind of, I think, an objectivist analysis of this would be like duty bound morality, which I think there's a lot of missing the forest for the trees in this movie. Um, at risk of me rambling, do you have anything to add of where I'm going here?
Um, I kind of just want to see where you're going with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Realizing now, I probably should have taken some notes here.
Oof.
All right. I think I kind of lost my train of thought. Where did I leave? Where did I leave off?
Well, you said that whenever uh, George is faced with a decision to commit to something that he wants, he kind of takes the something inevitably comes up that gets in the way of that, and he
Yeah.
decides, instead of doing what he wants to do, to instead kind of do what I guess he thinks is best for his uh, his business that his father ran, and
Hmm.
for the customers that he has, because if he didn't, the whole business would go under, and the kind of like antagonist of the film, whose name is
Henry Potter.
Henry Potter, no relation to Harry.
Yes.
um,
Um, so I guess the point that I'm trying to get to is more a question that I'm trying to answer, and
sure.
like, so what is what is the problem that the like average objectivist has with this movie?
I don't know.
Because
I'm
it's
guessing that it's usually framed in the sense that he doesn't do what he wants to do, and he always ends up doing something that is for the purpose of serving other people. Like his business is, you know, very almost a charity essentially, where they don't really make much
yeah
money from it. Um, but it provides like a better sort of living situation for his customers than is offered by Henry's business, which is very much kind of wringing everyone dry
yeah
and providing very minimal sort of accommodations. And I I can kind of understand where people are coming from, but like actually having watched the movie,
yeah
sitting down and actually enjoying the movie rather quite a bit, I think the kind of point is like, what do you value, and like finding what you value, and kind of seeing that what you are doing does have a positive effect on things, and kind of, as you said,
mhm.
seeing the what was it, fucking the forest or some shit. I can't remember what the fucking analogy
seeing
was.
seeing the forest for the trees,
Seeing the forest for the trees. Yeah,
or not
you
seeing
also
the
used that
forest
in
for
a
the trees.
tweet the other day. You get really getting use out of
Yes,
that one.
yeah,
Um,
it's a good metaphor.
Yeah. So like his entire focus is at that particular moment of like weakness at the end where he has his money stolen by Henry, um, and realizing that he's probably going to go to jail because like his I think he runs like a bank or something, like some sort of bank. I can't remember exactly what the name of it was.
Um, Bailey Brothers Building and Loan.
Building and Loan, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And like they're he's going to go to jail because they're short $8,000, and it looks
Mhm.
as though they've been embezzling other people's money. Um, and in that moment, he kind of looks at everything around him and sees like, oh, when I was young, I wanted to travel the world and I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that, but I never did it.
Yeah.
And he's like, why do I have all these crummy kids and all this other bullshit? And then he kind of just like runs away, and he has like this sort of crisis of realizing that he never did what he wanted. And I guess the guardian
Yeah.
angel kind of
Okay.
serves to recontextualize his view of things in like a when he's at his most malevolent, when he's like, what the fuck is what is the point of all this? I never did anything that was, that I wanted to do. The guardian angel kind of says, well, hey, if you weren't around and you never did all these things, look at how shit this place would be. This town would be run by this guy who doesn't give a fuck about anybody. And this guy, your friend here, what the fuck was his name? The like the immigrant guy that runs like a little bar or whatever. Uh,
Nick.
well, that he was the bartender, but
Oh.
there was also like, I think his name was it. It was Giuseppe Martini,
Okay.
and he was like, he owned a business, and he was like, there's a part earlier in the movie where he's talking about how he owns a house and he's not renting one anymore. He actually owns, he has achieved the American dream of he owns his own house. He's not renting from this Potter guy, and
Mhm.
he starts his own business and all that. And it's like, well, that guy would just be some fucking bum because I guess something along the lines of like he stopped that guy from accidentally poisoning somebody.
Yeah.
I don't quite remember how exactly he did that, but I guess he did. And
Yeah.
his wife is just she doesn't she's an unmarried like uh what do you call it? She was like a maid at like a hotel or
Librarian.
something,
Yeah. Like a
and
librarian.
uh at a library. Yeah, that's I think that's what it
Mhm.
was. And basically like saying, hey, you may think you never did anything that you wanted, but you still had a positive effect, and kind of recontextualizing how you're viewing your life. And it's like, sure, you could interpret that as live for the sake of others and don't be selfish or whatever, but like the things that he didn't do that he wanted to do, especially in some situations where like, do I let my bank and all my customers lose all their money? Do I let all my customers lose all their money and my bank go under, or my loan company go under?
Mhm.
Or do I go on my honeymoon? And it's like, well, your honeymoon is important, obviously, and
Yeah.
it's a very significant thing. But he also has this thing that is important to him because it was his father's, and he cares about it a lot. So he makes sure that doesn't go under. So I think it's mostly just about like reorienting, like being a bit more positive.
Yeah. I think what I was trying to like stumble my way through to a point earlier
Yeah.
was um the point about not committing to something is I think the misconception about the movie is that it's this is again this is the problem with like focusing on plot in visual medium is that if you get bogged down by the kind of particulars happening,
Yeah.
you're gonna miss the. I'm not going to use the metaphor again. You're going to miss
The larger picture.
the larger picture, the larger motion picture, and the character is someone that is essentially going through a midlife crisis. That's what he's dealing with. And I think a lot of the criticisms that are being kind of launched at the movie is as if this is trying to apply to it does have a universal theme, but it's I think I think there's a misunderstanding of trying to apply this to a young person that's more clear in their goals, because if even when you go back to George Bailey's I want to travel the world, there's not really a clear goal. Like, I want to travel the world, I want to make money. And it's like, okay.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if you remember when you were like a little kid, but little kids say shit like that where they're just they're like, oh, I'm gonna have this fucking Lamborghini or whatever. It's like, no, the fuck you're not. You're like 9 years old. You have no fucking idea. There's like a part when he's young and he's talking to this girl and he says he's gonna have like a harem and like 3 or 4 wives and shit. First of all, calm down, George. You're like 12.
But even when he's older, he's like about to go to college. Is he about to go to college, or did he just get back from the war?
I think
he's talking to Mary Hatch, who ends up being his wife.
Yeah.
And even then, he's like, we're gonna like build stuff, and he's doing this like hustler mindset or whatever. But it's not really connected to any reality. There's no long-term goal. There's just like this hazy feeling.
I was wrong. Mr. Gower was the character that he stopped from poisoning someone, not Giuseppe. Different character entirely.
Right.
I got confused there. What you're talking about is the scene where he's about to go to college, but then his dad suddenly dies, and he is presented with the choice of keeping his father's legacy going with this sort of the building and loan company, or going to college, and he chooses the building and loan instead. I honestly don't know. The problem with the idea of presenting that choice as like selfish or selfless is that it's presented in the context of a movie where someone gets to write and determine the entirety of the events that happen, where like in real life, if you were about to go to college and your dad died and he had a business and it fell on your shoulders to sell it or keep it running in the principle of how he ran it, I don't think that it would be wise to frame that as, oh, he chose to help others instead of himself, because it's not like he's a fucking poor guy living a bum's life on the street that also happens to run this loan business. There is a kind of funny scene, I guess, where they have $2 left.
Yeah.
Which was pretty amusing when they put it in like a basket and they're like, oh, that's they're like having a little celebration. But at the same time, it kind of applies to the same principle of what he said earlier in the scene where they didn't have any money left in the bank, but all the customers wanted their money, and he uses the money that was going to be for the honeymoon to kind of tide them over so that they don't go to Potter, and I think he was offering like 50 cents on the dollar for their shares in George's company or something like that. So it's like, he basically explained to them, like, look, we don't have the money here, but technically the way that this business works is you all have each other's money, in the sense that, like, we've been investing the money you've been giving us into, this guy, he used it to build his house, and, this, that, and the other thing. It's like the money is there. It's just being used. And if you can hold over, we can recover from this, essentially. And they do recover from it. And then everyone that remained loyal to his company is better off in the end, because they own their houses and they're not renting from the Potter guy. And there is no way that I don't think any objectivist out there would classify Potter as like a proper, rationally selfish capitalist character, because his main thing that he does in the movie that instigates the the like sort of suicidal downfall of George is that he steals $8,000 from him when he has no need for that $8,000, and the only reason he steals it is specifically to destroy George's company, which is just like the most malevolent shit ever. So he is a proper villain. Like, he's not a villain because he runs a company and makes money. He's a villain because he's dishonest and steals and tries to destroy other people's, lives, essentially.
And beyond that, he goes beyond being this like weird business tycoon to also being like a government shill. He becomes like the head of the draft like committee or something in the town.
Something like that. Yeah.
So, I suppose we're almost just using this as a way to bash on the way objectivists talk about movies.
Yeah.
But one, I think it's just important to set the record straight, because this is a really good movie.
Yeah, I was enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. Going in, I didn't go in with the sort of mentality as like, objectivists don't like this movie, I shouldn't like this movie. I didn't think like that, but I was like, at the same time, I wasn't expecting it to be as genuinely funny and like well made as it was, because visually quite the stunning movie for 1946. Right. Obviously, it's a couple years after Citizen Kane, so it's not like it broke new ground in the sense of the way that movie did, but it's certainly a very visually compelling movie. The one thing that's kind of stuck out to me was the scene where he visits his house in the alternate universe where he never existed, and his house is like in shambles because no one bothered to buy the property and build it up to the kind of grandeur that it was. Maybe not grandeur, because it still had some stuff wrong with it, but they kept it together, and it was a nice house.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't 100% put together. And it's like this kind of shambling shack with like the thing that kind of stood out to me was when he goes in and his everything is completely shrouded in shadow, and he's like this very black, just completely black silhouette as he's entering the house. And then you got the shot of the two guys at the front door, the cab driver and the cop. They're like, all right, get out of here, you crazy fuck, whoever you are.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. And there's one shot as well where he's going into a house, and there's rain dropping off of the rooftop, and he kind of tips his hat to the guy, and the water falls off the hat.
Yeah.
And really the whole sequence where he's trying to woo the woman that would become his wife, and she's wearing like the robe, and they're walking, and they talk about I'm pretty sure the house they throw rocks at is the one they end up buying and like building up. That whole sequence is like, just, I guess, iconic at this point.
Right. I really love the whole sequence at his little brother's school.
Oh yeah.
The school dance or whatever.
Yes, and the floor opens up to the like pool.
Yeah. And George and Mary fall in, and then everyone jumps in after them.
Yeah.
There was a Oh yeah, another thing. At the beginning of the movie, when they're calling Clarence, and this almost works like a framing device, like you would see in like a found footage movie or something, um, where I think it's Joseph is the angel that's showing Clarence George's life from when he was a kid and up until now.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a moment when they're like, "Oh, Clarence," and you just see this dot moving from left to right on the screen into the middle.
Yeah.
That made me giggle. Um, yeah, sometimes you find it's hard to talk about something that's like so obviously good.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is like if you just approach it as like on its own terms,
yeah.
it's a very fun movie. And I think the ending is actually quite emotional. The
Oh
like
yeah,
the
I got misty eyed a little.
yeah, yeah, with the all of the people that he had, befriended throughout his life, that he kind of just took that for granted.
Hmm.
Uh but then you kind of realize like that sort of thing doesn't really happen. Like obviously it's a fucking story, but like the idea of someone having that many people that give enough of a shit about them that they would be willing to like give them all their fucking money to keep their business going, kind of returning the favor that he did for them. uh like I said, it is a benevolent story. I don't know what people are talking about.
Yeah. Um, what was that like carol they're singing at the end? They start with "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and then they go into, you know what that song is called? Like, "All that time should be for God and never tell me why." Is that what I'm thinking of? Um,
Unfortunately, I do not remember what the song was.
yeah. Um, well, anyway, when when that song came on and they were like, it's that last the like iconic shot of the whole family back together again.
Yeah,
I was getting misty eyed, to be quite honest with you.
yeah, yeah. I
um,
will say the same. I will. it was it was a very good ending, I think. And
yeah.
the I guess the kind of point to be made is this is kind of something that Rand herself had said at some point. The problem is I've watched so many like Rand interviews and listened to like stuff of her talking about stuff and read so much of her stuff that I can't pinpoint where anything she said is from.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just like, she said this somewhere, and
It's just all downloaded. Like,
yeah, there was a time like maybe like a week ago, maybe like 2 weeks ago, where I was like 90% sure something I was thinking of was something that Rand had said. And I was talking to Simon in DMs, friend of the podcast, Simon, and
yeah.
I was like, Rand said this somewhere, and then I told him what I was thinking. He's like, yeah, she did say that, and he pointed me to where it was. I was like, I don't know how the fuck you remember where that shit was from, but it's kind of like, um, you know, framing something as being rationally selfish, where someone would, say to Rand, like the classic example of like, oh well, so if you were to do such and such for your friend, isn't that not being selfish? And then she kind of frames it as like, well, you have your hierarchy of values and you have your friends, and doing things for your friends is not something you do as a duty, but out of having the integrity of actually, you know, trying to figure out how to word this. It's like you don't have the right to call someone a friend and say that you value them if like the moment they need help with something, or you've never helped them with anything in their life, or
Yeah.
when they call on your help, you aren't there, kind of thing. You have no business prioritizing them as being like a great value in your life, and extolling them as being a value when you don't have the integrity to actually stand by them. And I guess the point to be made is that in this, he has a large group of friends, and it's not like it's a shallow like, oh, love everybody sort of thing. It's like, well,
Yeah. No.
you do what you can within the context of your life, And that's kind of to draw it back to what you said at the beginning of this, where like he did make a positive impact on the people that, you know, were customers of his building and loan company. And the connections that he forms with people are not shallow, and the help that he provides to them is not a duty. It might be viewed as a duty, I don't know, but like the thing that Clarence kind of leaves him with at the end, with the copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, with written on the front page, that no man is a failure who has friends. It's kind of like, you know, he did, you know, as far as the things that he valued in life, he did actually put the effort forward for those things, and it pays off in the end, because the people that were honest and were benevolent and gave a shit about George Bailey came together to save him from being wrongfully imprisoned for the crime committed by Henry Potter.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of thing shows like a sort of, as Randall put it, benevolence toward your fellow man, and like the strength of the sort of friendships that George had formed in his time in that crummy little town that he derided but actually loved.
Yeah, and you could almost like make a connection to. I know we've been getting explicit with the Rand stuff here.
Yeah, this might be the most explicitly Rand forward episode.
Yeah.
In an episode where we're talking about It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes. In a way, you could almost connect it to trying to. I was going to say James Taggart, but no, Hank Reardon in Atlas Shrugged, who spends the majority of the novel in this like state of flux and conflict, but is doing sort of the things that mean something to him, but not integrating that into himself to make himself an integrated whole, and that's his whole arc throughout the novel. You could make a connection to what George Bailey gets to at the very end here, where he connects, he finally integrates what his hierarchy of values to what he's actually doing in his life, and not trying to tether it to the moon that he's trying to lasso.
Right.
And so yeah, this is coming across as like a fuck you all other objectivists, but it's again, it'd been years since I've seen this movie. I must have been a kid, so it really wouldn't have meant anything.
Right.
But I just do not see where the one like altruist in Rand's definition of it, thematic concept is in the movie. And even if there is, like you were saying, if you just take the movie for what it is, or as Glenn from Rare Candy would say, submit to the material, commit to the bit.
Right.
Is largely George Bailey's disintegration, basically, is not committing to the bit.
Yeah, I suppose that the whole point with the moon is kind of like he has this vague, far off, impossible, unfocused idea of how things are going to be and what he's capable of doing. And the kind of realization that,
and he's still doing this into like his 30s and his 40s when he has a wife and kids.
Right, yeah. I mean,
And
it's kind of crazy to be in a sort of like, I guess, what's the term? Like a fog,
flux.
a sort of
Yeah.
like a sort of trance almost, where you're kind of unthinkingly like you've kind of drifted your way into having a wife and kids because there's kind of
Yeah.
like that part where he's like, why do I have all these crummy kids?
Yeah.
What's with all these children? It's like, dude, you had those children. What are you talking about?
It's like my brother in Christ, you had the children.
Yeah.
Like, um, yeah, I guess maybe you could make some kind of argument that there's like an over sentimentality in the movie, but yeah, even that, it's like I think it earns the sentimentality by the end.
Right.
Uh,
I suppose to kind of advocate for a point that others might make is that the movie's theme tells you to settle as opposed to like aspiring to,
sure.
but
Um,
at the same time I do think that there is still some aspiring being done with the kind of, maybe not literally, because it's like, you know, the
yeah,
whole uh saying, you know, oh, I'm gonna give you the moon, and it's like, well, some quote unquote romantic realist interpretation of that would be, you know, well, you should, uh, you know, give her the moon or whatever.
mhm.
But and I don't even think the movie is trying to necessarily go for like the, you know, oh, you gotta be more realistic, you gotta be more natural, you know, you gotta, you know, I don't think it's going for something like that. I think the
Yeah, no,
moon part is kind of just representing the far off kind of general
floating abstractions.
floating idea of what he wants to do that
Yeah,
is never actually in focus and never uh like he the things that he does with his future in mind that are quote unquote selfish and for him is never really like it kind of elaborated on, and it's never really something
it's
that he seems to think about in any real way.
yeah, it's never done with any sense of purpose or um, well, I mean, reason,
Yeah,
uh, because it's disconnected from reality.
yeah. The funny thing is that even though he kind of falls into the position of being the one that takes over the company,
Yeah,
the speech that he gives to uh, Potter when he does decide to take over, and his investors agree with his point that he made, kind of shows that he kind of was meant to be that guy. Like he
yeah,
clearly, when it came to that, he actually was speaking quite eloquently and very clearly, like on a principled matter, why his company should be doing what it's doing, and so on and so forth. And I think with the clarity of mind that he has at the end of the story, one could reasonably assume that he does live a happy life that is a rich life in the not a material sense, although it could be because he still does own like a bank, like a loan company and all that. Uh,
mhm.
a be, you know, owning your own house and your own business and having a wife and multiple children on a single income uh, might sound like settling by 1940s logic, but now that's kind of like the you're set, dude. You know.
Yeah,
Um, I think the sort of clarity of mind he has at the end of the story is uh, a good thing. I don't know.
yeah. I could see that there is a way to maybe misinterpret that settling thing, and you can kind of pick up on this when you like grow up in the Midwest or whatever,
Yeah,
when there's a lot of people that have just settled, but what they've settled for is as floating and abstract as the moon that he's grasping at in the movie.
Right.
So it's kind of like an inverse problem. And so I don't know. I think that's really just a misapplication of the thematic content of the movie. So
Yeah, I think a lot of people have heard one thing or the other about the thematic element of the movie, and then they go
yeah,
in with that in mind, and then
right.
they nitpick the entire thing, and then they just
Hmm.
they put themselves in a position where they're like, I hate this movie. It fucking sucks. It's a piece of shit.
Yeah,
And I think at that point, you're kind of just being like malevolent about a thing for the sake of it. You're kind of just
yeah,
being uh and that's not to say you can't criticize the movie. If you
right.
think
Yeah,
that that's the theme of the movie, you're welcome to that opinion. Um, and if you think that's the only important part of a movie, is that thematically it has a different idea of how you should live than you do, I think you should
yeah,
broaden your horizon of how you interact with movies, because that uh, especially if you're an objectivist, there are not many pieces of art out there that are going to be one to one representing your values.
hmm,
So you kind of have to look for the benevolence in things if you want, if that's what you're looking for. Obviously, if you want to watch some fucking gory, fucking nihilistic shit, you can go do that too. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. And I have.
Yeah,
We've talked about it on this podcast.
that's right. Yeah, it's it's it is what it is.
Yeah,
To be to throw in a little bit of a slogan there. I don't know.
um, yeah, that kind of covers it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much more to say about it. Um, Definitely worth a
Yeah,
watch.
for sure.
One of the greatest movies of all time. I think it's worth your time.
Yeah,
It's like what, an hour and oh it's
2 hours.
oh it's 2 hours. Shit, it didn't feel
But
like it. It felt
yeah,
shorter than the Shop Around the Corner, which was like
yeah, it
40 an hour and 40, I think.
it was hour 30. Yeah, hour 40.
Yeah,
Yeah, this. I mean, it really moves. It has that like old Hollywood, like um, what's the word? Oh, propulsion in the narrative,
yeah.
and it's just a really great movie. We didn't talk a lot about Clarence, but he's fucking hilarious.
Oh
Whenever he
yeah,
shows
yeah,
up,
yeah. His
uh,
whole there's a scene where he's explaining to he's trying to explain to him that he's an angel, and there's they're at like they're in some sort of building um after they met on the bridge, and he jumped in the water so that George would jump in and save him.
mhm,
And he kind of says to him like, you know, you were thinking of killing yourself, and he's like, how do you know that? And he's like, he says that he jumped in first because he knew that George would jump in and save him, which is kind of just speaking for the character of George, is that he's the kind of guy that would jump into freezing water to save someone from dying. Uh,
yeah,
and even when he's at his lowest point and he's thinking of killing himself, he jumps in with the purpose of saving the guy. Uh, and he's like telling him that he's an angel and all this shit. And the other guy that's in the room has like chewing tobacco, and every time he goes to spit it is when the Clarence reveals some shit about him being an angel, and he kind of has this like he just kind of stops and has this look on his face.
yeah. He looks like he's seen a ghost.
Yeah, he like falls backwards out of his chair, and
Yeah,
and he just kind of quietly leaves, and you just see him looking at him intently through the window as he walks by. Very, very great, like visual comedy with that whole
yeah.
sequence.
And they're later on when they're in the like the alternate timeline when they're at George Bailey's new house when it's like ramshackled.
Oh yeah, and he
And they're
fucking
they're
bites
getting
the cop.
he bites the cop and then he disappears, and you just hear "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star"
Yeah.
as he disappears.
Yeah. We were watching. I was like, man, I wish I had the ability to just fucking vanish and have like an outro theme.
Yeah. Oh, there's another kind of interesting story that happened with this movie. I can't remember exactly when it happened. It's probably on the whole Wikipedia here somewhere. Colorization. Yeah. There was this thing that happened in, when was it? Got to be like the 70s or the 80s. There was this move to try and colorize a lot of movies that were shot in black and white. In a way, you could look at this as the kind of like the 60 FPS throne room battle scene from Phantom Menace of its time, where they were trying to take this movie that was shot and made to be seen in black and white,
Yeah,
and give it a color sheen. And Frank Capra and James Stewart were against this, and like even went so far as to like, I think they like spoke at like the hearing or something. I don't know. It was this whole hullabaloo. But eventually there was a colorized version of a couple different colorized versions of It's a Wonderful Life released. Interesting kind of like little historical spat that happened there.
yeah,
It's made to be seen in black and white, and it works in black and white, so I'd watch it in black and white.
yeah. The sort of stylistic choices that you would make, knowing that the movie is going to be black and white, with like the harshness of the shadows and stuff.
Yeah.
If it's made for black and white, keep it black and white. If it's made for color, that's what it's made for.
Yeah.
And you said specifically the director was against this colorization movement.
Yeah, the director and Jimmy Stewart as well.
Ah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so
I couldn't imagine trying to watch this in color. Now that I'm like thinking about just the visual element of just like how the movie looks, it would just be very weird to watch it in color.
When we were first watching it in the server, I think the first thing I clicked on was a colorized version. I was like, oh, this looks wrong. And I had to exit out of it before I started streaming.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Did it win any?
I have no idea.
Curious here. When this comes out in 1946. I'm just curious here. 1947 Oscars.
Also, apparently he was a brigadier general in the fucking U.S. Army.
Yes, Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Frank Capra also directed some war propaganda films for World War II, which I think you get a little bit of in the like war segments of the kind of. There's the one where it talks about
his brother Harry.
Stopping the kamikaze pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he had directed like these like get out and buy war bonds kind of propaganda documentaries in the 40s. Yeah, it doesn't look like it won anything, but it was nominated for 5. So yeah.
That tends to be the case though with like movies that are often remembered as like the greatest. Is like you look at the Academy Awards for those years, and it's like a bunch of shit you've never heard of.
Yeah. Ironically, in that year, Ernst Lubitsch was given an Academy Honorary Award.
Oh.
So, maybe not ironically, but like
tangentially related to the contents of this podcast episode.
Yeah, so The Shop Around the Corner, a cute little movie to watch, maybe on a date night or something.
Yeah, and
And it's a
Wonderful Life, a American classic.
really a masterpiece, and one that you should watch probably every year because it's great.
Yeah, on a lighter note, when I was a kid, Home Alone was a yearly watch. There was a point where when I was a kid, I would literally just if the part at the end of Home Alone with all the bullshit, all the traps and all that, if that was like, I would watch that part divorced from the rest of the movie.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll go ahead and bring it to a close here.
Yeah.
Apologies for the little hiccups we had at the beginning of trying to gather our thoughts. And also, I hope it's not taken as any kind of slight against any particular people. I just gave some examples and wanted to gather my thoughts on um, the objectosphere and how how we talk about art. And I think we could do a little bit better of engaging with it rather than going in with our own preconceived notions. And that was kind of the big lesson I got from rewatching It's a Wonderful Life. Joe, do you have anything to end off with?
No, I don't think so. Other than it's been really cool doing this podcast this last year, and since this is the last one of the year before Christmas, and this is going up today, the 18th, and we won't be talking to you folks until the new year. I suppose we should take this as an opportunity to say Merry Christmas to anyone watching, and hope you have a wonderful holiday season.
Yep, Merry Christmas. We'll see you next year for season 3. We got a couple cool movies we're going to be talking there. And Happy New Year. We will see you in 2024.
Yeah, see you next year.
See you next year.